Hi all, I hope you all are doing good. Welcome to the data stuff. So, in the last weeks, we have been covering different data engineering terms that we encounter while working as a data engineer in projects. Last week, we were discussing about the difference between data, information, and knowledge. I hope you all liked it. In today's video, we will be discussing about kind of data that we are going to use in a data engineering project. So, based on the structure, the data is classified into three different categories. The first category is known as structured data, second is known as semi structured data, and third is known as unstructured data. Now, the structure that we are talking about is basically a data model that is associated with the data. So, a data model is kind of a rule or a set of rules that define how the data is going to be stored presented in the data storage solution. So for example, if you are talking about a database, that database will have an entity relationship diagram that will tell you which table is related to which table and what are the different columns that table will hold, what will be the different data types of those columns. So there is a schema. So that schema, that model is representing the data and it is defining how the data is going to be stored. So there is a definite structure. If you want to take another example of a data model, you can have a star schema or snowflake schema that we normally use when we are designing a data warehouse. So in that also we have fact table and we have dimension table. They are related to each other in a star, in a way like we create a star or snowflake. That is a different discussion altogether. So the point I'm trying to make here is that whenever you are working with a data set in the data engineering projects, you are going to have some structure associated to it if it is a structured or semi-structured database or a data set. So when you are talking about the structured data, so structured data is mostly like a database table. So for example, if I show you, so suppose that we are having a sample database like green cycle, and in that we have couple of tables. So now if we are talking about different tables, so let's suppose we go and check out the tables. Just a second. Yeah. So suppose, let me just query this actor table. Okay. Now see, it has a well defined structure. So you have different columns. Those columns have a definite name. They all are having certain kind of data types. If you try to put certain kind of data which is not supported in that column, you will get an error message. So it will have a kind of rule enforcement on this particular table. The database management system will enforce those rules for you, and if somebody is trying to put something bad in a column, it will throw an error. It will not allow that person. So there is a very strict structure. So if a data set has a very strict structure associated to it, it is known as structured data. So that structured data will be like having a very strict data model. Now coming to unstructured data, so the unstructured data will also have a data model, but it will be very loose data model. So for example, if you want to create another attribute for an actor, suppose you want to also add awards, so you have to create a column, and that column will be created for every actor in this table. So you cannot be like selective about, let's suppose Nick Wahlberg will only have this particular column. In fact, you have to create this column, and this column will be for everything, every actor in this table. So you have a very strict rule, strict data model when it comes to structured data. But when it comes to semi structured data, you can have a liberty to, be a little flexible about the data model. So suppose if you see this JSON, so in this JSON, if you see, you are actually having some kind of cake, and that in cake you have different options of batter and topping. Suppose if you are the owner of a cake shop, and if you want to change the toppings, if you want to add more toppings or remove certain toppings from them, you can actually do it. Like this JSON will allow that flexibility, and you can easily do it here. Instead, if you try to do the same thing in a database table, it will be very very difficult. So semi structured data is very helpful when you are working with something in which you do not know how many attributes will come in future. So you cannot decide certain rules beforehand. So you cannot see how the recipe is going to evolve for this cake, how many more toppings you are going to choose in future. So in that scenario, you should take semi structured data instead of having to go for a very hard data model like a structured data. Okay. Now the third type is known as unstructured data. So unstructured data is mostly like you have certain text files, you have certain videos, you have music, you have audio recordings. All those kind of files are unstructured data. So most of the time when you are dealing with the big data domain, you are going to get either structured data or semi structured data most of the time. But when you go into the domain of, like, if you are doing image processing, if you are doing facial recognition, so you will be dealing with a lot of images, audio video recordings, so such kind of things. But 80-85% of the time as a data engineer in most of the projects, you are going to work with structured as well as semi structured data. Unstructured data only comes into play if there is something like you are working on a Microsoft's face recognition API. So you will be having a lot of data to go through to train a machine learning model. As a data engineer, you will be working on unstructured data there. Okay. So overall, like, if you recap, there are three main categories of the data: semi structured, structured, and unstructured. In the structured, you have a very strict data model. You have to follow all the rules that data model has. Only then you will be allowed to store or interact with the data. Semi structure gives you certain level of flexibility. You can add and remove attributes as and when you want, but again, you can actually make sense out of it. So the data model will allow you certain level of understanding in semi structured data as well. Now when it comes to unstructured data, it's like a random stream of bytes, or at max you can read it, but you will not be able to present it in a certain way like you do it in the case of structured data and semi structured data. I hope you are able to understand this point. Now, how it impacts your data processing as a data engineer. So the thing is that the correlation between the structure of the data and the complexity to process it, like if you are creating a pipeline for a table versus if you are creating a pipeline to process the data that is coming as audio recording, then I would say the complexity is negatively correlated to the structure of data. If the data is well structured, you will have a lot of options and the data processing will be much more easier than the uh, data that is coming as unstructured, and then the complexity of the data processing will be very very hard. So you will be having a lot of algorithms in place when you are working with unstructured data. Like you will have to create certain kind of algorithms where you can parse the data as a stream of bytes, because video and audio files are nothing but the stream of bytes. So you have to apply certain algorithms which are in the domain of image processing or audio video processing in order to process it and make sense out of it. But if you are working with semi structured data or a structured data, there are pretty standard set of tools available to you. So you will be able to easily process them and you will be able to get the results out of it. So I hope you understand this, and I hope you find it helpful. Please let me know if there is anything that I can cover more, and if you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much.